Riverside City College Division of Language, Humanities, and Social Science brings you Looking Backward, Thinking Forward, a webcast series designed to reach out to our students and foster community. Our primary objective is to help students become more familiar with RCC professors, staff, and services, and students themselves, fostering community, but also offering intellectual insight into academic studies and support aspiring students to become more driven and inquisitive students. Please enjoy this broadcast of Looking Backward, Thinking Forward.
School psychology is under the umbrella of like educational psychology. So a lot of people use school psychology and educational psychology kind of in the same umbrella. But school psychology is a specialized program, meaning that when you go to get a degree in school psychology, your goal is to become a school psychologist. It's a training program, sort of, right? Like you train to become a doctor, for example. We're not doctors, but in the same way, we train to become school psychologists. So school psychology is under the umbrella of like education. So if you look at school programs and universities, you'll notice that school psychology is usually under the College of Education, not psychology. So it's interesting that way. So it's a very half and half hybrid between studying psychology, which is in our case human development, learning and cognition, abnormal psychology, and then the learning part, like learning how to read, learning how to do math, and writing, all those things. So we're kind of experts in a hybrid of those two areas. Um, yeah, so basically what we do is, you guys probably heard of school counselors in schools, and a lot of people mistake us for that. School counselors typically work for one school, and they have they take maybe a portion of the students, and they help them, of course, with counseling, but also help them with like their scheduling and to make sure they graduate and things like that. School psychologists kind of work more under a case by case sort of basis and under the consultation basis, which means that when a student's struggling and the teacher in the classroom and the parents and the administrators, they feel like they've tried many things in the regular classroom and they still are concerned about a student, either academically or behaviorally or emotionally, then they might refer that student to me. And what a psychologist would do is they would do a full comprehensive, we call it a psychoeducational evaluation. So we look at their learning, their development, their socialization, as well as their like reading, math, writing, those kinds of skills. And then really our job is to sort of give recommendations and consult. Now, our word is not final, but for example, I might recommend that a child become qualified for maybe special education services under like learning disabilities or autism or emotional behavior disorders, right? Things of that nature. So I might actually maybe ask the parents to go see a physician, their pediatrician, to get like an ADHD examination, right? So it's kind of I do a full evaluation, and then we sort of make recommendations for that child and how to best help them in the school setting. So most of psychologists are like I would say about 70% of them actually work in schools, in public schools, some in private schools, but in schools. And then some of them work in private practice and they see students or children at their own leisure that way as well. I don't want to take up too much time, so I'll pause here and I'll let maybe Dr. Larson or Walpoff take over from here. Yeah, is that a good start?
That's very good. Thank you,
Okay,
David. Thanks for
there you
giving
go.
us a heads up
No
there.
problem.
Yeah, Dr. Larson, Dr. Raquel Larson, if you could, say a little bit about your area of expertise and whatnot.
Yes, I have a couple slides. They're going to be really fast. And so it's just more of a reminder for me to discuss what I wanted to. So basically, my background is in psychology and law. A subfield of that is in forensic psychology. My educational training is actually I have a master's in child development. And then in my PhD program, I was studying developmental psychology and cognitive psychology. And so things that I do, I really engage in research and teaching, but there are also other aspects of the psychology and law field where we do program evaluations like interventions. So I've written government reports, like written a government report for the government of Sweden, for instance, for how to interview children in forensic settings. So we do all sorts of things. In terms of psychology and law, it's just this intersection between the two fields. And it's really cross-disciplinary. So you can actually get training in any field in psychology and just have a specialization in psychology and law itself. So many of my colleagues have training in social psychology or developmental psychology or clinical, but then just have like a specialization where they've worked in graduate school, for instance, with someone who specializes in this field. There's also master's programs that specialize in it as well. And so just kind of as a brief thing about what psychologists do in this particular field, we engage in advisory activities, so we can be expert witnesses and trial consultants. We make a lot of forensic assessments, some of them for like bail or parole or competency and insanity pleas. I myself do forensic interviews with children and adults in terms of their memories for especially long-term memories of trauma. I mentioned the evaluator part, and then there are also ways in which we advise legislatures about policies that could be reformed or changed in our laws to accommodate the evidence in terms of how the criminal justice system should work. So just like very briefly, these are some of the questions that we can ask in psychology and law and that we help with. We ask about how to make the system more legitimate. We ask about what kind of systemic biases there are in the criminal justice system and evaluate that. That's a big area of my own study. We look to see what eyewitness memory is like and under what conditions it's accurate and how we can improve it within the system. Why jurors make the decisions that they do. If we can predict dangerousness, if we can predict dangerousness to the point where we can prevent it in the future. And then we also look at things like deception detection, false confessions, interrogation strategies. And then also we look at things like criminal profiling, and people can work in the government, they can work in all sorts of settings like this, they can work in industry as well. And then we can also work within some rehabilitation programs as well. So there's actually a lot of avenues for careers in psychology and law, and it's a really exciting field, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have about it. Thank you so much.
Well, that's a tough act to follow. She's catching terrorists and working for the FBI over here.
Sorry. Let me go ahead and stop this share.
All right, hey folks, I'm Mark Wolpov. If you don't know me, I've been at RCC about 11 years now, and I'm really excited about our psychology program. I know Professor Rees is going to talk about the ADT and the transfer model itself, but I teach developmental psychology, I teach general psychology, and often research methods psychology. I also work in the STEM and Familia program, which I want to talk just a little bit about, as well as I work with our colleagues over in biology and chemistry and mathematics. And I do some summer research projects with them, so I'll tell you a little bit about that as well. But my background is actually more general than Professor Lee and Professor Larson. I do have a PhD in developmental psychology, so I studied cognitive development, which means the way that we learn how to think and solve problems. I'm particularly interested in collaborative problem solving, so really more like the exchange of ideas. So those of you who are familiar with Lev Vygotsky, if you've taken Psych 9 or even in a Psych 1 class, you might have heard of Vygotsky, where we learn through sharing of ideas. We learn through collaboration. We can get better at skills, cognitive skills, by watching others and by having them scaffold and solve problems with us, so that we can do better. So my research focused on particularly the exchange of or collaboration of ideas while working on solving problems, and really trying to find out who are good at collaborative problem solving, what types of people are better at collaborative problem solving. And the particular group that I'm most interested in is athletes. I really like sports. So working with athletes to see if being athletes means you're always collaborating with people, your teammates, your coaches. If you're at an NCAA institution, then you have all sorts of other support systems, like you have academic support staff. So you go to study hall, you do things like physical conditioning. So you have trainers, you have conditioners, you have those physical staff, but you also have psychological staff as well. So sports psychology is a big part of that. And so coming from a background in developmental psychology means how do we improve over time? And particularly adolescence and going into the early adulthood years is a very important time for mental health, for strengthening mental health. And of course, for athletes, you have to be at the top of your game in order to compete at that top level of college and beyond. So I did some work in sports psychology at UC Riverside when I was there for my graduate work, as well as I finished my PhD. I stuck around at UCR for another year, and I worked at the athletic department, and I did a program called the Highlander Way, which was really cool, where we were kind of helping the incoming athletes acclimate to college and really get used to the system, but also teaching them how to develop study skills, how to really maximize the use of their resources so they could work together well with other people. And in my research, I found that athletes are actually quite good at taking information from a lot of different sources and integrating that so that they could do better. They could actually solve their problems better in some cases than non-athletes who didn't have that collaboration experience, right? They don't have the everyday opportunities to work with people so closely. So then I did some work with the athletes themselves. We did a lot of just sort of focus stuff and a lot of goal setting, trying to figure out what do you want to accomplish. I'm big in visualization, so working with athletes to try to see themselves accomplish their goals. And of course, now I'm a Little League coach. My son plays baseball and basketball, and so I work with youth and do a lot of the same sort of goal setting. What do we want to accomplish today? Let's review and see how much we did accomplish. Can we see ourselves making improvements in the areas we want to improve later? And it's really fascinating to see psychology implemented in these applied settings. So it's a little bit about me.
Okay.
Talk about the program? Yeah.
Very cool. All righty. Yeah, Zoom. Wonderful. Prior to March, I didn't even know it existed. I waited until the lockdown before I discovered what Zoom was. In any case, so I noticed there's quite a few of my students here. Thanks for being here. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Ronald Reese. Please call me Ron. My background is maybe even more different than my colleagues because my master's degree is not in psychology, it's actually in neurosciences. So I went from a bachelor's in psych to a master's in neurosciences at UC San Diego. And right after that, I went into the pharmaceutical industry and I was working on developing drugs for individuals who have stroke. So that was initially my career goal. I was gonna work up the ladder. I was working at a small company called Cortex, appropriate, right? Cortex. And at Irvine, which had a very, very strong link to UC Irvine psychology program. In fact, Cortex was actually somewhat founded by 3 neuroscientists at UC Irvine. And while I was at Irvine, I was lured, if you would, or almost lured to work at much larger companies like Pfizer and Abbott Labs. We're living in a pandemic now. You guys are familiar with that COVID-19 antibody test. That's Abbott Labs. So they were going to offer me big bucks, if you would, to work on treatments for Parkinson's. And then a couple of years later, they asked me to reconsider after I said no to them to work on treatments for Alzheimer's disease. But by that time I left, I had decided that the pharmaceutical industry wasn't for me, and I really loved teaching. And I was what you would say a freeway flyer for a few years. I was making a living, jumping around, teaching at college after college. A few years later, I went back to school, got the PhD in psychology, and the rest is history. So I just want to mention that regarding my background, if you choose, let's say, a biopsych/neuroscience background, you very much have these 2 broad options for you in terms of job or career. You can go the academic route, become a teacher, researcher in academia, or you could go industry route, the pharmaceutical industry, biotech, and there's certainly advantages and maybe some disadvantages as well to both. But I'll sort of touch on that real quickly. Now, that being said, hopefully you guys can still see and hear me, right? My internet's sort of coming and going. But anyway, that being said, what I thought I would do is talk a little bit about the Psych ADT, and then after that, just open it up to questions. Okay, sound good? So I'm going to share screen. So hopefully you guys can all see this, yeah? Yeah, I think you guys can all see this. So, okay, so I want to say a few things now, just to switch gears a little bit, talk a little bit about the Associate of Arts degree in psychology here at RCC. It's more commonly referred to as the AAT, Associate of Arts for Transfer, or sometimes it might be referred to as the Associate Degree for Transfer. Now, when this degree was created a few years ago, it was done so with the intention of facilitating your speed to the bachelor's degree, specifically if you apply to a Cal State University. So if you apply to a Cal State University, or if your intention is to apply to a Cal State University, absolutely, positively, you want to consider pursuing the AAT. Now, the psychology AAT at RCC is the same AAT degree at Moreno Valley College and Norco College. Depending on one particular option specific to stats, you will have accumulated either 19 or 20 units towards that degree. Okay, so I'm just going to jump right into it. What are the required courses? Well, of course, Psych 1 is a required course. It can either be Psych 1 or Psych 1 Honors. Psych 1 is a prerequisite for Psych 2. That's a course that I teach every term, the biological psych course. Psych 9, Psych 50. So those first 4 courses are absolute requirements for the AAT. I should also tell you that Psych 50 has 2 prereqs. One is Psych 1 and the other is stats. Correct, Mark? Yeah?
Yep.
Okay, so yeah, keep that in mind. Psych 50 has actually 2 prerequisites. One is Psych 1 and the other is stats. Now, you have a couple of options regarding statistics. We, of course, would strongly prefer, we would strongly like if you choose to enroll in Psych 48 as opposed to Math 12. However, you're not penalized if you take either one, right? So Psych 48 is called Stats for the Behavioral Sciences. I believe this term, both Dr. Larson and Dr. Lee are offering it. I think that's right. And I guess in SOC, is there somebody offering it in SOC? Psych 48 and SOC 48 are basically the same class.
They are the same class. They're just cross-listed.
Yeah. Okay. So we've got that option for you, or you could take the Math 12. Now, a few years ago, we decided to actually create the Stats for Behavioral Sciences because, and I'm going to go ahead and be blunt. Perhaps I'm going to be more blunt than my colleagues, but that's okay. We created it because we felt that, well, maybe I should choose my words carefully. We felt that perhaps some topics within this field of stats were not being addressed in the way we would prefer to prepare students for Psych 50. In other words, we weren't all that happy with what the math folks were doing in preparing people to take our Psych 50 course. So we went ahead and created it. That was a few years ago. Things have been going great with Psych 48. So if you haven't had Math 12, you certainly could take Psych 48 instead, and we would encourage you to do so. If you have taken Math 12 already, don't lose sleep over it. You can still enroll in the Psych 50 course as well. Maybe I should ask Mark to comment if there's anything else he'd like to add to this.
I think the most important thing that you should know making the decision is that we want your statistics course to be taught by a behavioral scientist, not by a math faculty member. Math is really good at math stats, but that's not what best prepares you for behavioral research methods. And so having a behavioral research professor for your statistics course is going to help you provide you the context of the types of questions you'll be asking and answering during a research methods course.
Okay, very good. So yeah, there you have it. Again, we would encourage you to take the Psych 48 over the Math 12. Now, we also do understand, us faculty here in the psych discipline, that our academic counselors, who I know many and I love them all, trust me, I do, but they might encourage you more, lean more towards Math 12 over Psych 48. There's a couple of reasons for that, which I don't want to get into. Personally, I don't think they're great reasons. You can put your mind at ease knowing that if you take Psych 48, it will articulate, it will transfer to either the UC system or the Cal State system. It absolutely will, okay? In fact, just to prove my point, here is the IGETC, also known as the Intersegmental GE Transfer Curriculum for both CSUs and UC. This is just of a year ago. And when you scroll down, look at Area 2, Mathematics, Psych, Soc 48 are listed. They are listed there, so they will articulate. Okay, Mark,
We have a couple. Yeah, we just have a couple questions in the chat here. So a couple Kimberly's are saying that the Psych 48 is a better choice than Math 12. Brianna just asked if we could take Psych 48 if they're planning on transferring to a UC, and do we recommend taking that course if they're planning on majoring in psych regardless? I'll answer that first. UCs are a little bit funny. Each campus has their own rules in terms of what classes they accept and how they accept them. So it is ultimately your responsibility to check with the individual school you're trying to transfer to in terms of what they will accept. But as a general rule, every college should accept that. And if you have a problem with it, we're willing to help you out and try to convince them to accept our Psych 48 course. We have full control over what goes on in the Psych 48 course. We do not have any control over what goes on in Math 12. So some folks in math, some of the math professors do incorporate some of the behavioral approaches, but a lot of them just don't. And so you wind up spending about a month on coin flipping and probabilities, which is, interesting maybe and fun, but it's certainly not going to prepare you for the research methods course. If you take Psych 50, you're going to learn to do t-tests and one-way ANOVAs right away, where you're actually looking at variables that are used in behavioral research, and you're going to be able to think about those kinds of questions a lot more effectively when you get to Psych 50. Those of you who have taken Psych 12, you are allowed to still take Psych 48 if you want to. You are not required to. You have met the minimum requirements for Psych 50. But if you feel like you'd be better off if you also take Psych 48, you are allowed to do that. Okay, so we have had students who take Psych 12, get to Psych 50 and say, oh boy, I'm not ready for this stats wise because maybe the Math 12 didn't prepare me for the psychology aspect of this. And so we do have students who do that. You cannot take them concurrently if you have not already taken a stats class, though. It is a prerequisite. So you can't enroll in Psych 48 and Psych 50 at the same time unless you've already taken Math 12. But if you've already taken Psych 48, then you're good to go. You just move on to Psych 50. Or if you have taken Math 12 and you don't want to take Psych 48, you do not need to. You are welcome to go straight to Psych 50.
Okay, very good. Yeah, I did attend a community college before I transferred to UCSD. I did take a math stats course, and I can certainly, based on my experience, concur with what Dr. Wilpaul said regarding the issue of probability. We spent an awful lot of time, rolling the dice, which is good if you want to become a gambler. And I do have that history as well, but anyway, that's another story. If you want to become a behavioral scientist, you don't have to spend too much time on that and move on to the really good hardcore stats. Okay, so that in a nutshell describes the absolute required courses for the Psych 8DT, with one exception. You do have the opportunity to choose currently 3 courses, but next year we will be adding a course to that, and that's Psych 10, which I'll be talking about shortly. So in addition to taking Psych 1, Psych 2, Psych 9, Psych 15, Psych 48, you must take one elective course in order to earn that AAT. And currently we're offering Psych 8, Intro to Social Psych, Psych 33, the Theories of Personality course, and Psych 35, Abnormal Psych. So as long as you select and complete and pass at least one of those 3 courses, then you're fine. You will now have satisfied your obligation to actually earn the AAT, as long as you complete the general ed requirements, right? English 1A, and whatever else your counselor tells you to take. Okay, so that's basically the AAT. I do want to talk a little bit about Psych 10, but before I do that, are there any questions that anyone might have regarding the AAT, the psych or psychology AAT degree?
I've got one.
Sure. Who's that? Can I see?
It's Rob.
Oh, Rob. Yeah, Rob's a current student of mine. How you doing, Rob?
Hey there. Hey, my quick question is, as I'm trying to sort out what to do with the places I'm transferring to, I've gotten some information that says, well, for the sort of things you might be interested in, you may be better off with the regular, I think it's the AA 469, not the AAT for psychology for transfer. And that's, I'm trying to figure out what circumstances would be better if you're still interested in going into a psych discipline, but let's say you're going into cognitive neuroscience. Would this be an appropriate, with AAT 568, I think, be the appropriate option in that case? Or if you're going to clinical?
Yeah, I think what you're alluding to are those psych numbers which might be found in the Assist website.
Yeah.
Mark, you might know what he's referring to.
I don't know the specific of that, the degree you're talking about. My answer to basically anybody who asks a question like that is, if you're really close to completing more than one, do both. It just opens extra doors. There's no reason why you can't have multiple pathways available to you, because you may not know exactly which path you're going to take, and having, let's say, maybe one class, usually those are like within 1 or 2 classes of each other. It's really a matter of finishing that last class and then saying, okay, I do have my degree in psychology, but I also have this maybe specialized, I don't know exactly what classes it takes to get that other pathway you're talking about. But yeah, you can do both, and that way you're eligible to transfer for multiple different pathways.
Okay, thanks.
Are you saying that you're double majoring, or I'm still confused as to your question?
Well, so it's a little hard to explain without my little visual aid here, but I guess I can skip it. What I've done is I pulled every single articulation agreement by major that has any interest to me from all the schools I'm interested in. And I went through and I made like a truth table and figured out what all of the required course patterns are for all of them. And I looked for overlaps. And so I found that there's a certain set of courses that if you take this set at RCC, it sets you up for the most possible transfers to different programs. Mostly this is UCSD, just because they have probably 20 of them, whereas at UCR and I think UCLA, UC Irvine, they all seem to have just 1 or 2 that you go in for psychology. It's either a BA or maybe a BS, and that's kind of it. And UCSD breaks it down pretty extensively. And some of UCSD's programs require, for example, calculus, or things like that, which aren't in any of the AAT or the 469.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So what Dr. Wilpoff just mentioned to you is certainly an option. Generally speaking, though, and you and I did have a discussion about this a couple of weeks ago. Maybe I didn't point this out, but generally speaking, most certainly of the college administrators, they're going to recommend to students that you don't really spend too much time at the community college for the very simple reason that there's only so many units that are going to transfer anyway. And I don't want to reveal too much about, the private conversation we had before, but so I won't. But really the idea is to get in and get out as quickly as possible, choose that school. UCSD is great, speaking from experience, earned both my bachelor's and master's there. Go for it, man. And again, if you want, we can go ahead and address it a little bit more in detail, if you'd like. Okay. All right.
It's all good. I appreciate the info. I think it still fits with what I learned earlier. The main reason I asked again is because I just had a one-to-one with some admissions folks at different schools, and I need to just make sure that what I heard there squares with what I understand from our conversations. So that's all.
Okay. Cool. Great.
And good for you for doing that. That's the next level, is really looking at the institutions you want to go to, making sure you met the requirements. The last thing you want is to apply, get accepted, and it's conditioned on you having completed a course you didn't take, and now you're scrambling in summer school or something to try to meet that last requirement. So good for you for knowing what those requirements are.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, so just a real quick announcement. If any of you will still be around in the fall, you will have one other elective option. If all goes according to plan, and I've got the fingers crossed, we will be offering a new elective course called Psych 10, Personal and Social Adjustment. Now, this will be the only applied course we offer within our psych discipline here at RCC. And there are many Cal states that offer this course as a lower division. Some of them will actually take it as an elective and allow you to apply it towards a major. Others may not. What this course specifically deals with as an applied course is it's going to touch on a lot of material that you will have read about or come across in a Psych 1 class, Psych 1 textbook, but now it gives you the opportunity to actually apply it to yourself. So we will, for example, touch on issues such as stress and coping, learning how to cope with stressful situations like a pandemic, and also other issues that you may come across in the workplace, in interpersonal relations, and whatnot. So I think it's going to be, well, the way I envision it right now, and I will be offering this course, it's going to be somewhat, it's going to really have a different scope. It's going to be taught differently than what you might have come across in some of the other courses, because the emphasis now is really trying to take that material, which we've learned through research in psychology, which we've learned through our readings, and able to apply it for your own personal growth, your own self-actualization, and whatnot. Okay, so again, if you're still around in the fall, that will be another option for you to consider in addition to the 3 that we have already as electives, okay?
We had a couple of questions in the chat, just don't want to forget about those.
Oh,
so,
yeah,
Casey, I can answer your question. She said, if you are doing the iGETC program, can you still complete the AAT at the same time? Absolutely. I believe at that point, it's just a matter of like filling out another piece of paper. If you've met the requirements, then I believe you should be eligible for the AAT as well, as long as you've met all the requirements. Tatiana asked, which classes do we recommend taking of the elective classes? So Professor Ruiz just talked about the personal and social adjustment class. He's also taught Psych 33 and 35.
No, I've only taught 35.
Oh, you've only taught 35. Okay, so I've taught Psych 8 and 35. They're all different. They're fun. These are more than, so compared to like a Psych 1 or Psych 9, these are mostly Psych majors because you have students that are taking this for the degree. It's just sort of depends on what area of psychology you're more interested in. Psych 8 goes more into like group dynamics, personality, a little bit more about, well, when I taught Psych 8, it was more about goal setting. Also, it was more about really pushing yourself to understand how you get along with others. Psych 35, Professor Ruiz can talk more about the way he teaches it. When I used to teach it, it was a lot more about understanding mental disorders and diagnosis process and obviously the treatment process that goes along with that. So it's a lot more medical, a lot more clinically oriented. And it's like 33. I'm not sure who's going to be teaching that now. Is Professor Romero, if any of you know him, he retired last year, so he was the one who always was offering that class. So we're not quite sure how that's going to shake out yet, but that's more about learning the longer standing, bigger theories, meta theories in personality area of psychology. So going back to Sigmund Freud and a lot of the followers and challengers of those kinds of theories. So it's really up to you, whatever you find more appealing. There's no right or wrong way to go. You could take multiple ones too. You only need one of them for the degree.
Yeah, although when I do one-on-ones with my students who ask for advice, I often say that at least traditionally the social side carries most weight, perhaps more so than any of these other courses, because a lot of psych programs, maybe not just in the state, but throughout the country, might even require a social psych. Unfortunately, it won't be a lower division. They're going to probably require an upper division. So, taking social psych as a lower division, at least it might, prepare you once you transfer and you find out you got to take it again. Gosh darn it. But at least you'll already have an idea as to who Milgram was and Zimbardo and all those other ruthless people doing those terrible studies. If you're really interested in the clinical route, then sure, I would recommend abnormal psych and also the personal and social adjustment. Personality can go either way. Certainly some people in industry are very, very familiar, psychologists who work in industry, very familiar with personality theories as well as assessment. And let's say you're working as an IO psychologist hired by HR to screen applicants for a position. That certainly would be something to look into as well. So really, again, when I do the one-on-ones, the first thing I'm going to ask you is, what is it you want to do, or where do you see yourself 10 years from now? What do you see as a career? What's your ideal job, et cetera, et cetera. And then I go from there to try to give you advice on what electives to take, and then maybe also what courses to take for your GE, if GE requirements, if your academic counselor didn't tell you. Okay, so I tried.
Question for Professor Larson. In studying forensic psych and law, did you find that you had to incorporate law along with your psych field in order to further explore the forensic aspect, or did you always know that you wanted to do both?
Yeah, thank you. That's a really great question. So there are some programs that actually incorporate both law and psychology. So there are joint programs, for instance, that have JDs, which is the law degree, as well as psychology. Myself, I was actually a business major for most of my undergraduate career. And I was a double major in psychology and business, but really more business, until I took a psychology and law class in my upper division time. And it really changed the course of my trajectory. So in terms of the field itself, you don't actually have to study law or specific, like you don't have to go to law school, you don't have to take legal classes, that sort of thing. I tend to, in these kinds of fields, we tend to be cross-disciplinary. So we might take classes in criminology or sociology to supplement and help broaden our areas. However, in terms of this sort of thing, you can go into a field and not have to have that emphasis on law itself, because there will be people in your graduate areas that specifically study this interaction, and you can get it within that field. Yeah, so really great question.
Okay, next question is more for the future, but what is the best way to look for jobs or places to work as a psychologist? She's planning on working as an MFT or child therapist as of right now. So who wants to take that one?
Well, I could recommend, Casey, that perhaps you join the American Psychological Association as a student. And every month or so, you would probably receive in your email a list of job openings. Although if you want to go MFT, the APA might not list those. So I would probably recommend doing a Google search, see if there's any MFT organizations or newsletters you can get a hold of, if that's what your goal is. Okay. But to be honest with you, once you graduate with that degree, you'll probably be able to find a job or learn about jobs through your graduate school training and so forth.
Yeah, you'll be doing like internships and yeah, practicums in settings. So you'll definitely be in touch with the workforce, and hopefully have connections there as well. Yeah, I agree. A lot of questions coming in.
Next, yeah, a lot of questions coming, so we'll answer faster.
Yeah.
What steps do you need to take for clinical psychology? Well, I'll start that answer, and then maybe Professor Lee or Larson can tell more about the applied side. But really, it's very similar as an undergrad. You just do general psychology. There is no difference between a research psychology or a clinical psychology route as an undergrad. Maybe you would take like Psych 35 as your elective, get more into the mental disorder side instead of like personality or social psych. But it's really when you start looking into graduate programs that you would choose more clinical oriented programs. There are programs like UCLA that have a specific clinical program in a totally different department than the research psychology, or there are some programs that are blended where you could have just a clinical emphasis, like University of Minnesota is probably one of the best blended programs. And then there are some programs where you actually just do research and then you end up specializing in clinical psychology as your area of research. There's also PsyD programs compared to PhD programs. So a PsyD would be a doctor of psychology. That is a very specific training for a clinician. It's not really a research background at all. So you really have a lot of choices. You could go the master's route like the MFT or therapist, where you're doing a lot less schooling, but you're not actually a psychologist, or you could actually go the route of becoming a clinical psychologist, which is that doctoral level program. Okay, next question is Arsal at CSULB, they offer kinesiology sports psychology degree. So he asked me to shed light into what a career like that looks like and what that degree has in value compared to a psychology degree. So Long Beach is one of the better programs in Southern California in terms of sports psychology. They have really good athletics department in general. So high level athletes, high level faculty there. Kinesiology is obviously not housed in the psychology department either. So it is more of an applied degree. At RCC, we do offer the class of sports psychology, but it's actually taught by coaches and kinesiology professors. So it's a little bit of a cross those two disciplines. So you're not actually a psychologist. You could not call yourself a psychologist. You could not work with athletes who are struggling with other mental health issues. So for example, if you work with athletes who have motivation issue, you might be able to help them. But if they have a depression, you would not be able to do that. You're not clinically licensed or trained to handle those types of mental health problems. So you wind up kind of being limited. It's like having one hand tied behind your back when you're doing that kind of work. So what they end up doing is they call themselves more like performance enhancement experts or things like that. It sounds like we're giving steroids now, but they're really just mental health trainers, if you will. And so that's a useful position, but the world of mental health is a little bit, it's a little bit hard to break in. And you can't go around bragging like, oh, look at that athlete, look how great he or she's doing, and that's because I work with them. You can't do that. That's a violation. So it's really more working with teams, working at universities or colleges, or having a private practice where you work with individuals. Often at the highest levels, you actually work with the agents, the professional agents network, and then they know which mental health experts they want their athletes to go to. So it's kind of a messy field, but yeah, if you're going in the kinesiology sports psychology side, you'd probably be doing more team building kind of stuff, and rather than less individual consulting, because you just can't do as much at the individual level. Anybody else want to add to that? Okay, Arsal, does that answer the question then? We got a lot of questions, so we'll move on. If you want more information, I'm happy to answer. Brianna, I want to know what to major. I know I want to major in psychology, but I'm not sure what I want to focus on or specialize in. Do we have recommendations on how she can figure out what she really likes or how she can narrow down what she wants to study? So many options, it's a little overwhelming. Great question. I would say don't try right now. Just enjoy your undergrad experience as you get to see everything. And when you start looking at transferring into not just your four-year school, but when you actually think about graduate programs, that's where you have to start choosing your specialty. So for now, just kind of write down ideas. This is what I like. This is what I didn't like as much. And then start focusing on the areas you did like. I'll tell you my personal story is kind of funny. I applied to a number of graduate programs. Every single one was in social psychology, except for UC Riverside was developmental psychology. And of course, that's where I ended up going.
Oh, that's
So,
interesting.
yeah, so my background is developmental psychology, but not because I wasn't interested in social psychology. And of course, I told you I study how people work together. That's still social components of the developmental psychology. Same question for Marilee. So anybody else want to help try to find how to specialize in psychology?
Yeah, I think once you get into a four-year program, you'll notice that the psychology school or department has many different professors who specialize in different areas. I would recommend taking a variety of classes and maybe being involved in their labs and seeing what kind of research they do. Because undergrad programs are generally psychology, and you don't have to choose a special area as an undergrad yet. So while you're an undergrad, like President Walpole said, enjoy your time there and explore different elective classes. I was in a lab, a child development lab, and that's how I got into child development and like abnormal development and language acquisition because of the professor I worked with who I enjoy working with. So yeah, that's what I would say. It's to get involved with some of the research that's going on at Cal State or UC or wherever you transfer to.
Actually, maybe Raquel, I really like what you wrote in the chat. It sort of piggybacks what I was going to say. If you want to touch on that more, regarding school.
Yeah, I just was echoing my colleagues that a lot of this is something that you can worry about later when you're at a four-year institution where you're starting to figure things out. Like I said, I didn't know what I was going to do until literally my senior year in undergraduate. And then I did a master's after that and still was kind of like, okay. So I feel, if you're feeling like you're not exactly sure about what to go into, that's a very common normative feeling. So I want to make sure that you realize that first and foremost. But in terms of when you're going to actually start specializing, a lot of times, like my colleagues have said, you are getting a broad degree at first. Try to get your experience in multiple kinds of classes, like Dr. Lee said, because that gives you an idea about what you may or may not actually be interested in. One of the things in terms of graduate school, like we recommend, is trying to get to know at least a couple of your professors so that you are able to get a letter of recommendation from them. That's good recommendation just now, too, while you're here, is just come to office hours, talk to us. And when people are asking for recommendations, it helps a lot more that we know you and like have had experience with you so that we can say more than here's the grade that you got in this class and that's it. The other thing is like what Dr. Lee was saying, is trying to get involved more in activities. So for instance, like graduate schools are very interested in if you've had any kind of research experience. So later you can, at your four-year institutions, if you're transferring, you can look for a variety of labs where you can volunteer as a research assistant and get involved in that way. Or there's lots of clubs on campus right now, for example, that you can get involved in. Any of that kind of community involvement is also very good on applications, even for transferring into a four-year institution. And then the other kind of thing is like with graduate school, you're more applying to work with a specific person and a specific specialty than you are a school. So where you usually in college are going to be saying like, oh, I want to transfer to UCR. In graduate school, you're more looking and contacting people to see like what their research interests are and how you're going to fit into that particular field yourself. So you really want to follow your interests more specifically in that regard, as opposed to just like, I want to be going to, this particular school. So that's something that you will worry about, that particular part, if you're going to be interested in graduate school later. However, for your 4-year, like if you're interested in transferring, it does help to get a broad education in different kinds of classes just to see what you're interested in. And I always recommend connecting with your professors, so that letter of recommendation, or just, connecting and trying to get more involvement and knowing what you're actually interested in this field would actually represent. So hopefully that helps.
Great. Kimberly Martinez had a question for us. You want to ask your question, Kimberly?
Oh, hi. Sorry. So I guess my niece was using my Zoom, so she left her name on there. But, okay. Yeah, so it's Isabel Martinez, but okay.
Okay.
I hope I'm not repeating the question again. But so when I first came back to college, I kind of had like my path laid down already. I'm like, I'm going to go for school counseling and I'm going to do it at a Cal State. But the more I learn about psychology, the more interesting it sounds, and like research wise. But again, my counselors over and over again tell me, like, if you want to do like go out in the field and start working, then you do a Cal State. But if you want to get more into research, then you more likely are to do like a UC. And then based on you guys' experiences, what would be the major difference between those two?
Professor Lee, you want to answer that one?
well, as an undergrad, I mean, as an undergrad student, it doesn't matter as much. Now, at the UCs, there might be more research going on, so more labs, more professors who are doing active research than maybe at a Cal State. But if you yourself are applying to school, that's when it might make a difference. For example, when you apply to a master's program or a doctoral program, especially PhD program, they're mostly at the UCs, right? That's why they're the highest tier. So most of the PhD programs will be at UCs. So if you really want to get involved in research, maybe UC might have a little more opportunity, but when you apply to PhD programs or master's program, I don't think it matters as much. What do you guys think? I think the undergrad institution is not as important in terms of the UC versus the Cal State. But then you'll notice when you apply that if you're looking for a PhD, for example, then you'll notice that, like Dr. Larson said, it's program specific. So you'll see that most of the PhD stuff you'll find in like the UCs a lot of times. Yeah.
I tend to say that the undergrad institution doesn't matter so much if you're planning on going on to graduate school anyway. It's typically the last school you go to, the highest school you go to, that really is what's preparing you for what you're doing. So if you're worried like San Bernardino or UCR, you're fine either way. I really wouldn't worry about that. But if you're worried about where you should go to graduate school, that's when, some of Dr. Larson's advice really kicks in. Really know why you're going, where you're going. That's when you shouldn't be saying, oh, I want to go to UC Santa Barbara because it's close to the beach. Maybe that's what you do for an undergrad, but if you're going to go to UC Santa Barbara for graduate school, it's because they're doing research there that you really want to go be part of, not because it's closer to the beach. So the campus, if it's a UC or Cal State, they're all pretty good schools. They all have really strong faculty. They're all doing really good work. So just pick the one that suits you the best or is in the best place for you. Janelle, did you have a question? Janelle, did you have a question? Okay, maybe not. If you do, please just put it in the chat. Sabrina is aiming to become a psychiatrist. You have to go through extensive clinical training. Is there any opportunities that you can start now? Also, what program schools are good to aim for? I've never heard any professors focus on how to do this. So
there's a reason for that, yeah.
Psychiatrics is not in psychology. Psychiatrics is in medicine. You'd actually be going through medical school. You'd get an MD or a DO, and then you would then decide to specialize in psychiatrics as your area of medicine. So it's much, much more biologically oriented.
I think you're freezing up there.
We lost Mark. We lost Mark for a second. Yeah.
Actually, let me just go ahead and piggyback on that, Sabrina. So what you could do if you're really serious about pursuing psychiatry, as Dr. Wilpaul said, that is a medical degree. So typically that's going to take you on a different track than if you want to become a clinical psychologist. If you want to pursue psychiatry, then once you transfer to Cal State or UC or any other four-year school, you'll probably declare yourself a pre-med student. I briefly did that, when I first transferred to UCSD. And now you're taking the bio, the chem, the biochem, the OChem, all those fun courses. So if that's what you want to do, then that's what become a psychiatrist, and that's the route you're going to take. If you decide you want to go the clinical psych route, then of course you stay as a psych major, and once you transfer, you pursue that bachelor's degree in psych, and then from there you go on to apply to a graduate program in clinical psychology. What else does that say? So do I have to go through extensive clinical training? Well, either clinical psych or psychiatry, yeah, you are. My cousin just graduated from a clinical psych program. Actually, I was enrolled in a clinical psych program, graduate program many years ago. And one of the reasons why I left is because I was going to have to complete 3,000 hours of practicum. That's on the job training. And then after that, you got an internship. In medical school, they call it residency. So yeah, you're still looking at, a total of 7 or 8 years of training before you're actually out in the workforce doing what you want to do. I don't want to dissuade you. It's a very, very noble profession, but you should be aware about it. Psychiatry and clinical psych, they're very, very similar, but they're actually going to require different tracks, for you to achieve that goal. So.
All right. Next question. What habits or mindsets helped us stay motivated throughout our academic career? So that's a really good question. I'll go first and say I just put my head down and went through it. I never looked back. I said, I'm going to go to school, I'm going to go to college, and I'm going to go straight to graduate school. And I finished my PhD at 27. So I don't know that that's something that everybody can do, but I know that if I had left, I would have had a harder time going back. But Professor Lee had a different story. So what got you back into school?
Yeah, so I was working as a school psychologist, and I was finding myself lacking in some knowledge, and I kept reading research articles and enjoying that part of it. So I went back, and what motivated me really was my colleague. Just I think having a good support group, not doing it by yourself. Undergrad, I was kind of alone. My friends were different majors. I had basically no psychology major friends. But then when I got to grad school, I realized that all my friends all my classmates are doing the same thing, and we met together a lot, and we support each other, especially grad school, where you're going through a rigorous program together. I think that having really a nice support group helps a lot. So when I got back in the PhD program, people were really in the same boat. Like we had side career, they're former teachers, former psychologists, whatever they were, and then we were back in school again. So even though when we lost motivation and we lost our drive a little bit, we would definitely get together, have social gatherings, and then also work together. Sit down and work together and collaborate on work. So I would say the mindset really is that you're not alone, that you're working toward a goal, and that especially in grad school, you have these milestones that you're going to reach, and to have a support system to work with you, I think is one of the best things I had in my academic career. Even at undergrad too, by the way. But personally, I struggled more undergrad because my friends were I was a biochemistry major as well, a double major, and most of my friends were biology major, pre-med, that kind of stuff. And I was taking psychology classes by myself, basically, and I felt kind of alone. But then grad school was a whole different story. I really enjoyed it. Everyone was psychology, and we were in the same boat, the same, complaints, the same projects, and it was really, really awesome, and it mentally helped me get through the program.
Yeah, most graduate programs, you're put in a little cohort, and you guys got to stick together, and that
it's
really
awesome,
does help.
It's awesome.
So it's a nice difference between undergrad and grad.
I guess I had a couple. Is that okay?
Go ahead. Yeah.
I guess for myself, there were a couple things. One, my advisor in graduate school said the PhD, the P in PhD stands for perseverance. It's not that people who finish are smarter or anything like that. It's about just sticking it out. And I think that for myself, it really helped with sub goals. So not thinking of like, oh my goodness, I have to do all of these things the entire semester. It was like, I'm just going to get through this week. I'm going to get through this day. I'm going to get through this hour. And sometimes that was all I had to do, was just get through that particular point. The other part was like Dr. Lee was saying, with trying to maintain a support group. And the other part of it for myself was realizing that most people have imposter syndrome, where they do not feel like they are belonging or keeping up, or that everyone's stressed out. And you might think that you're totally alone in that. And just like Dr. Lee was saying, everybody is going through this. And at the very beginning part, other people may not be expressing that, but all the way through my undergraduate career as well as my graduate career, I think it was helpful for me to realize that even if people are not expressing that, then they are actually going through that. And it kind of seeps out in conversations later about recognizing that we're all going through the same kinds of things. So that keeping that in mind is really helpful.
Great, thank you. All right, more internships at RCC. So thank you so much for asking that question, because I did want to come back to this. I mentioned I do a summer research project through the STEM and Familia program. It's not exactly an internship, but if we do offer opportunities like this, I would strongly recommend taking advantage of it. In summer of 2019, so we were on campus, I worked with, she's a chemist, and we developed a project on citrus tastings. We took samples from UCR and we brought different varieties of citrus. And then I created a project where we actually took a sensory manipulator, a special berry that you can take that changes the way you taste things. And we did a really cool project. It was a week-long summer project on that. And then the students from there got to use that as a, not quite an internship, but participating in specialty program. And then this past summer, because of COVID, obviously everything was online. I actually did an online project with the STEM program to study the psychological effects of COVID on students. And so my Psych 50 class in the spring, we had done some research on that topic, and I used the summer as almost like a second wave of data, which was really cool. And so my summer participants were able to introduce variables they thought might be related to COVID coping skills. And so we did that. So I don't know what next summer is going to look like yet. It'll probably be online, but that'll be available. We don't have traditional research labs, so Psych 50 is your best way to get to know psychology research faculty. And I don't know what's going on this semester, but I've personally had multiple students turn projects that we worked on from Psych 50 into research that we've brought to actual conferences. So I had a student complete a project we actually presented together at the University of Minnesota. And I had another, it was at SPICY, at Society for the Psychological Study of Social Issues. And then I had a student a couple of years ago, we went to the APA presentation at San Francisco, which was the really big 15, 20,000 person conference that we presented there. If and when we get back on campus, you go to Quad 229, you'll see our presentations are up there on the wall, and you can learn more about those projects. So take advantage of opportunities like that. They do exist, even though there's no formal research labs. All right, Daphne, what are the differences between concentration of health psychology and preclinical psychology? So considering medical or PA school, and taking a holistic approach. So how can students get involved in APA is the secondary question. So health psychology and preclinical psychology, anybody want to tackle that one?
Yeah, I can say something about that. Well, health psychology, you're really getting specific now, because if you decide to go clinical, you can concentrate on health psychology, just like you can concentrate in forensic psychology, or as my cousin did, and what I was going to do, concentrate in clinical neuropsychology, which is working with individuals who have brain injuries. Now, coincidentally, my PhD is in psych with a concentration in health psych, but I didn't go clinical. So regardless if you go clinical or not with health psychology, one thing you can be certain of, you're going to become well-read in the topic of stress and coping. Lots of stress and coping, stress and coping, stress and coping, stress and coping. You can learn about the hormones, you can learn about the transmitters and all that. And then of course, you're going to learn about those mechanisms where you can teach individuals to actually be able to deal or cope with stress. So what else is the question? I'm sorry, I was typing something here.
I think that's good. We've covered that a lot. We also have like 13 more and about 10 more minutes. So trying to move forward. So
you can reach out to me because again, I was enrolled in a clinical psych program as well. So I already included my email there. You can contact me and I'll give you some more information on that.
All right, Kimberly asked about the pre-psychology program San Bernardino offers. I don't know anything about that. I'm not sure if any of us do, Ron.
Yeah, well, I just typed something there. So
okay.
I just had a student this last spring after he completed my Psych 2 and Psych 35. He graduated, transferred to Cal State San Bernardino. They only accepted him as a pre-psych major. Folks, you need to know this. Psychology is so darn popular. Many programs throughout the state are now impacted, including Cal State San Bernardino. So when you transfer, you probably won't transfer, well, definitely not at Cal State San Bernardino. You won't transfer as a psych major. You'll be accepted as a pre-psych major. You have to maintain a certain GPA for that first semester. It's somewhere between 2.4 and 2.7. I forget what it is. It's less than a B average. After that, then you can apply to become a formal psych major the second semester. Okay.
Thank you. Rob was asking about your GPA and applying to a grad program. It's one of the factors. It's probably not the most important factor. When you look for graduate programs, typically, especially research programs, what they're looking for is the best fit. And really, that's more of a qualitative assessment than quantitative. Obviously, test scores matter. Obviously, GPA matters. If you roll in with a 1.3, they're going to say, yeah, you didn't take college as seriously as you could have or should have. You're probably not the best fit. But if you roll in with a 3.6 or 3.9, I don't think they're going to look at you and say, oh, you have a 3.6. That's not good enough for us. You have to be able to create your narrative about why you're the right fit for the program and why you're the right fit for that lab. Some programs are more lab specific, like UCR, you're actually applying to work for a specific professor. UCI is more of a general program. You just apply to work for the department and then you choose your mentors and your project advisors as you go through. So again, get to know the school you're looking for, but doing things like research experience is far more valuable. If you can get some letters of recommendation, that's far more valuable than say a difference between a 3.6 and 3.9. And honestly, I don't think the institution matters all that much either. They're looking for diversity just as much as they're looking for prestige. So if every single applicant came from UCLA, they probably wouldn't want all of those people to come to the lab because they wouldn't bring different ideas. They'd have the same basic training. So you'd have people who came from UCLA, that's a great school, but having different schools represented or different ways of thinking about psychology would matter a lot more to them, I think.
Yeah, most grad schools, master's and PhD require some sort of personal statement. I think that's a very, don't take it lightly. It's like an essay, it's like an open-ended essay about yourself and why you're a good fit for the program and why you want to do the career you want to do. And that's, I think, far more important than just your GPA, yeah.
Yeah, let me just piggyback on that. I just read that in our great nation, 100,000 bachelor's degrees in psychology are granted pretty much over the last couple of years. So what you want to do is separate yourself from the rest of the pack. Like Dr. Larson, Dr. Lee, and Dr. Wilpoff mentioned, I'm going to echo this, only maybe I'm going to put more emphasis on it. You really want to get research experience. You really do. I worked in 2 labs. One of them was my honors thesis as an undergrad. And even if you're going to go the clinical route, even if you're just going to go the master's clinical route, it's not going to hurt. It can only help. So I got that experience. I learned those skills and I applied them, really when I got into grad school. I was working in neuroscience labs. I knew I wanted to go that route. Got me into a neuroscience program. So that's what you want to do. As an undergraduate, let's say you transfer to UCR, you come across a professor who's teaching a course, let's say in child development or lifespan, and maybe you find out she's doing research on autism, and that really piques your interest. So this is what you do. You earn an A or a B in the course, not a C. She's going to laugh you out of the room. An A or a B. Then you approach her at the end of the term. Then you ask, please, pretty please, with sugar on top, can I join your lab? I want research experience. I'm really serious about pursuing grad school, pursuing psychology as a major and a career. And again, like I believe Dr. Larson mentioned this, you don't need to be the genius. You don't need to be the walking computer. What professors look for is motivation. Okay, that's what they're looking for. They want someone who's reliable and motivated. So once they accept you into their lab, working with kids with autism, if you say you're going to be there Monday, Wednesday, Friday, then you're there Monday, Wednesday, Friday, right? That's what you do. So you want to show that you're reliable and that you're motivated, and they'll write those nice letters for you. And in addition to that, you'll also get credit for volunteering in that lab. You will get units for it. You absolutely can. And I strongly recommend you do that. You want something in your transcript to show that in addition to coursework, you're also getting research experience. Okay. That's what's going to help separate you further from the rest of the pack.
And if you're really lucky and you have a collaborative professor, you could even publish, or like Dr. Walpole said, present at a conference. That looks amazing on your CV resume when you apply for grad school. If you already present at a conference or have a paper published somewhere with a professor, that is a gold currency for applying to grad school.
I got my name on 2 papers. I presented my own poster at a conference in Pasadena. I did all that as an undergraduate. Again, all that so-called little stuff really does matter. It really does help.
It's like work samples. Yeah, it's like real work samples that you have. So yeah, it's really good.
Not just that, when you are applying to graduate school, what you're really doing is applying to be a collaborator and saying, I will be productive if I go there. And so it means more to them to see that you've been able to do something than to see that you're a good student, but maybe haven't accomplished anything yet. We did all put our emails in the list in the chat, so you guys can please do reach out to us if you have more questions about it. One more question from Casey was about the honors program. So Professor Rees can talk about that as just another way of getting through to impacted psych programs. But other than that, we're up on 12:30 now.
Yeah, we'll be wrapping up. So yeah, Casey's one of my honors students this term. Yeah, so we do have the articulation agreements, the honors program, and the rest of you who aren't honors students, this might be sort of like a commercial, an advertisement to maybe have you consider joining the program. But we do have articulation agreements with UC Riverside, UC Irvine, San Diego State, as well as some private schools. Can you guys hear me? Can you guys hear me? I hope you guys can hear me. Okay, and we also have some other type of agreement with UCLA. Now, let's say you transfer to UCR after completing our honors program. When you transfer and get accepted to UCR, you are accepted into their honors program. I would assume, again, Dr. Wilpoff, Dr. Larson might be able to help me out here. I don't think the psych program at UCR is impacted. Is it? Yes? No?
I don't know if they use that word, but they certainly have more people than they can accommodate.
Okay. Well, so yeah, I'm not sure how, if I can really answer that, but if you do apply to UCR, do apply to UC Irvine after completing our honors program here, and you get accepted at school, you will at least be accepted into their honors program as well. Regarding majors, again, that's going to vary. So yeah, I'm more into the UCSD psych program than UCR. It's ranked really high, UCR. I'm joking. I got two UCR grads here. Yeah.
Just in general, though, the more you can do to distinguish yourself is good. So if you can do honors, do honors. If you can participate in the research program, do that. If you can work in a lab when you get to your four-year school, then do that and start building your resume so that you're the most competitive applicant. And then sure, things like GPA and test scores, those will help when there's close tiebreakers or things. But and like Professor Lee said, having a good personal statement, really spend time thinking about why you want to do what you're saying you want to do, because that's the most important question. They're going to ask you for interviews is, why are you here? Why do you want this program? What are you hoping to get out of this? And they're looking for the best answers. Okay, so want to wrap up?
Sorry, can I add to that? Can
Oh,
I add
please.
to your final statement?
Go ahead.
So would you recommend that we start like now, or I mean, considering we're like in a community college and stuff, but we're still considered doing our undergraduate years, right? Or am I mistaken?
You absolutely are. And you can start, I always recommend things like volunteering. So get some level, if you don't have a resume yet, you need to start, get a resume, do something, volunteer at a place that helps provide food for the holidays, or if you're working at church, join some sort of group when you're in your church, or if you are part of an organization, do something so you can start building your resume, so that you start to stand out. And then you look for opportunities within the field. And then if you have paid experience or jobs that shows real life experience, that's good. But try to make this sort of logical, coherent pathway to why this is what you want to do, why you've prepared yourself for what you want to do better than anybody else has.